from the studios of Farm Journal Broadcast.
Icons in agriculture and great American barns. Tour a palace of corn in South Dakota, plus preserving the barns of Indiana, one brushstroke at a time. We'll take a tour of a tobacco barn, rich in Kentucky history, and corner a round barn, still finding itself useful after decades on the job. And we'll see how a Michigan craftsman is helping these fallen heroes serve on for our feathered friends.
Agday, brought to you by the dependable, longest-lasting Chevy Silverado.
Good morning, I'm Clinton Griffiths. As a way to attract settlers to move to the rolling plains of the Dakotas, the town of Mitchell, South Dakota, built the world's only corn palace in the late 1800s. National reporter Betsy Gibbons shows us the history of the iconic palace and introduces us to the lone farmer who supplies the corn for it.
Standing tall in the heart of Mitchell, South Dakota, sits the world's only corn palace. True to its name, the building is decorated with corn inside and out.
All of our decorating is done with colored corn, and ryegrass and sourdock is the dark stuff you see under, which is actually a weed that we dry out.
The first Mitchell Corn Palace was built just 3 years after South Dakota became a state, when the city was just 12 years old.
The palace has quite a history. First built in 1892, it was resurrected as a way to compete with surrounding towns. The hope, attracting travelers and settlers. The structure has been built and rebuilt 3 different times, but the corn detail changes year after year.
And by looking back in history, in 1892, there was a lot more straw vegetation and less corn. The corn was strategically placed. It was made out of wood back then, not brick.
Behind a palace so colorful and rich in history is one lone grower.
I'm the only one that grows the corn for the corn palace.
That's why I don't.
Just outside of town, Wade Strand grows almost a dozen varieties of colored corn for the palace. He even supplies the rye. He got the job after a family member approached him to help.
We plant it usually after our regular field corn's planted, just because we don't want to take the chance of it freezing off, and it's not as hardy as the new varieties as far as cold tolerance. And we want it to pop up and grow fairly quickly once it does grow.
As Strand harvests the crop, it's separated and taken to the corn palace to be stapled on black tar paper.
It'll take them 2 months to just do the corn.
As the murals change with the seasons, the efforts of one farmer.
I've been doing it so long, it just part of the everyday deal.
And his many helping hands, keeping the South Dakota piece of history attached to the fabric of its future. Reporting in Mitchell, South Dakota, I'm Betsy Gibbons.
Now, if you live in the country, chances are you've given directions to your farm or house by using landmarks and not street signs. A great American barn in Portland, Michigan has such a job. This barn and silo along Old Highway 16 just west of Lansing, Michigan helps promote the New Era potato chip brand. That was a regional brand of chip first made in Detroit, Michigan back in the 1920s. The company's logo was the black silhouette of a thin woman, seeming to imply that chips were not fattening. New Era paid barn owners to put this clever marketing tool on their property. This one, near Portland, Michigan, sits alongside what was once a bustling road. In fact, it was the main thoroughfare between Lansing and Grand Rapids, Michigan. Frito-Lay purchased New Era in the 1950s. Previous owners repainted the New Era billboard for its nostalgic value. The barn, now owned by Chris Smith, who farms in the area. He uses it to store straw bales. Chris told us he still uses the barn to give directions to his farm. Our thanks to Chris Smith for sharing his great American barn. Well, still to come, tobacco was once a major cash crop in this country. The old barns used to cure the leaves are still a sight to see. Plus, we meet an artist on a mission to help maintain Indiana's farming heritage, one barn at a time.
Get the roots your crops need by getting Radiate first. Visit lovelandproducts.com/radiate. See your CPS dealer today.
Welcome back. When you say you're painting a barn, people may assume you're simply slapping a fresh coat of paint on the aging exterior. But for one Indiana artist, Gwen Gutwein, her paint work involves careful research and a light touch of the brush. A decade ago, she set a goal to paint at least one barn in every Indiana county. It's her way of keeping heritage barns alive. The backdrop, an October sky, and a water fountain serenade, setting the mood for Indiana artist Gwen Gutwein.
I try to paint either first thing in the morning to capture early morning light on the barn, or late in the afternoon, again when the light is long.
With brush and palette and keen eye, Gwen is recreating Indiana's barns on canvas. Her temporary studio moves from county to county, 92 in all.
I was very concerned about the loss of our barns. And being an artist, I wanted to do something I could do to give back and to draw attention to the demise facing our barns.
With a mission in place, Gutwein set out to capture the character, the aged timber, the hardened hinges, and the weathered facade of barns throughout the state.
The barns reflect integrity, they reflect ingenuity, creativity, beauty.
With photos in hand, Gutwein is finally ready to paint. She prefers to work on location, a practice known as plein air painting.
I let the barns tell me how to paint them. But generally speaking, I have my own personal approach, just like every artist, so that I can capture the character and the mood that surrounds the barn.
As if traveling to every county of the state weren't enough, Gutwein wanted to do more. 3 years ago, she helped create the nonprofit Indiana Barn Foundation. It tries to educate the non-ag public on the value of the state's aging barns, a value that barn owner Kathleen Nichols might call priceless.
We all want to go back and remember when life was simpler, when we lived off of the land and we didn't spend all day on our cell phones.
Gwen calls this endeavor a self-inflicted project, a way to enrich her own life and those with an appreciation for history.
What is it about barns that you're so passionate about?
The biggest thing is that barns are so much a part of our heritage, and we are losing them. And if we lose that, we can't get it back. It's gone.
But Gwen's campaign hopes to limit those losses by guaranteeing a lasting image. The promise goes beyond canvas and oils by reconnecting a younger generation that is now further removed from agriculture than ever before.
I'm really concerned about the younger generation becoming more aware of the barns, because I think if a person doesn't have any connection to something in any way, then it's hard for them to see the importance of preservation.
Preservation and giving pause to those seeking peace and tranquility on the farm.
This is a good place to just come and sit and remember how it is to have a gentle life.
A gentle life, indeed. Now, Gwen has accomplished her mission, reaching all 92 counties, and in most cases, it was 2 barns per county, but she tacked on a few additional barns for good measure. 10 years in the making. Later on this special edition of Ag Day, we take a closer look at one of the barns that Gwen captured on canvas. Its unique shape creates unique challenges and opportunities for the owner. Kentucky's agricultural history is rich. Tobacco was the state's leading cash crop in the 19th century, but as times have changed, so have the crops Kentucky farmers grow. Tobacco acres steadily on the decline since its peak in the 1980s, but today, those tobacco barns still stand, with many still in use. Tyne Morgan takes us to Kentucky to show us one tobacco barn still turning out memories today.
Perched on ground just southeast of Hopkinsville, Kentucky, Steve Bollinger is preserving a piece of his family's history.
This is an old dark-fired barn that was probably built back in the 50s and 60s, and It was used for dark fire production, but now we use it for burley, so it's still in use every year.
Built by his grandfather, this barn's roots are in dark firing tobacco, a process with specific needs.
For dark fire production, you have to have a little tighter barn. This barn's a little older, it's got a little looser, it's got a few planks missing, but for burley, you want air ventilation. You want ventilation at the top, as you can see ventilation at the top. It's got diamond cuts on the side, so it's made to let air in and cure. It has to cure, air cure.
Today, 70% of the nation's burley tobacco is Kentucky grown. Born in the U.S. in the 1800s, it's a piece of American history Bollinger keeps alive each year.
Burley, most time we'll cut in August, and it'll dry out probably by October, November. You can start taking down and strip it. Put about 5 to 6 plants per stick. Dark you put on a wagon, and you bring it to the barn. The stick actually hangs between. See this way.
Raising burley and dark fire tobacco take time, but it's dark fire cured tobacco that's more of an art, giving the tobacco a desired smoky flavor.
The dark fire process is totally different. Dark fire, you cut it and let it wilt. You hang it in the barn. You'll pack slabs. You get slabs from a sawmill, basically. You put slabs down and you pile sawdust probably knee deep. You'll light it several fires per row. And we'll let it smoke, and it'll smoke for a week or two. Then you'll do it again for about 2 or 3 different times. And it puts a slick-looking shine on it, and it heats it and cures it. It's more of a heat-cured tobacco versus air-cured.
Bollinger says the art comes from the flames. If it's too hot, the process can ruin the tobacco, but if it's too cool, the crop will rot.
There's been some people come by and said your barn's on fire, because you'll see smoke coming out of the eaves and everything. And if they're not from this area, they'll think it's on fire, and it looks like it's on fire.
Bollinger says dark firing tobacco isn't easy. Over the years, if too much air crept into his barn, it caused uncontrollable fires. As a result, he lost 3 barns from fire over the years. That's why newer barns are made of metal and built tight, where little air can get in. With 8 barns in use today, he says each structure gets used to its fullest capacity.
If you're putting dark fire in the barn, it'll probably hold 2.5, 3 acres, maybe at max. Burley will probably hold 1.5 acres. And burley, you spread it out a little bit further so air can get into it and cure it. Dark fire, you get 8 inches probably, because you got heat, keep it from rotting.
No matter what type of curing process he's using, Bollinger says each of his old barns require a little TLC.
Yeah, I've had to put some posts in it and put some tear poles in it. You hang the tobacco on and different things, but it's old barn.
And Bollinger hopes it's these aging timbers of his Kentucky tobacco barn that continue to play a role in this family's story for generations to come. From the fields of Kentucky, I'm Tyne Morgan for Agday.
All right, thanks, Ty. Next, we visit an impressive barn in northern Indiana that stands as a tribute to true craftsmanship. And we'll meet a craftsman who gives new life to barnwood. When construction of our next great American barn was underway, Henry Ford had just developed the concept of an assembly line for his Model T cars. Babe Ruth played his first professional baseball game, and Woodrow Wilson was president. The year was 1914. The barn still stands today. Inside that barn, there's a wooden silo that the Callaways still use to store silage for their livestock. It's made from wood planks held together with bands. Jerry says a couple years ago he swore he'd never fill it up again, but they keep filling it and using it. Harvest-ready corn waving hello to an old friend. This classic Indiana round barn, draped in hues of red and green, just celebrated its 100th birthday last year.
We're kind of the old McDonald's farm. We have this, that, and the other.
Jerry and Phyllis Calloway have lived on this farm for a half-century, but it's been in the family since the Great Depression.
We love what we do. Farming is a way of life for us. It's not a job, it's a way of life.
This barn is the focal point of the farmstead. Construction began in 1914 and finished the following year. 8 laborers built it from the ground up, 80 feet in diameter and 54 feet from the basement floor to the peak. And it's that peak, a self-supporting roof, which was an engineering marvel for the time. In the beginning, a cupola similar to this one sat at the peak, but it threw the balanced roof off kilter and it partially collapsed.
But they went around and put support posts in.
According to the National Barn Alliance, the state of Indiana boasts the highest number of existing round barns in the country, about 80, but most are not used in modern agriculture. Well, that's not the case for the Callaways, who still have livestock in the lower level and farm equipment and a silo up above.
Everybody thinks they're unhandy, but after you get used to them, why, they're not any different than a square barn.
Old barns are dwindling because they're not in use, and this is a working round barn, and it's a working barn, period.
A working barn that requires constant attention.
How important is upkeep on this barn?
Well, that's 100% of it. If you don't do the upkeep, why, you're going to be going the other way real fast.
Perhaps a relative term for an aging structure more than a century old. But under Callaway's care, the future is promising.
Because it's a family heritage, and it's something that we can pass down to our children and hopefully to their children if they maintain it.
Delivering on a promise, preserving a classic barn, upholding Hoosier history. Well, up next, barn preservation is not always successful, and when it comes time to bring it down, there's a craftsman in Michigan who's ready to give that old timber a second chance.
In the Country, sponsored by Kubota's BV 4580 round baler. Learn more at Kubota.com or visit your local Kubota dealer today.
Welcome back. Travel the countryside and old dilapidated barns dot fields and tree lines, standing as skeletons of days gone by. In Michigan, there's a man who sees these failing structures as potential future homes for our feathered friends. Weathered and worn, this barn is just one strong wind away from finality. But hidden in this mass of termites and timbers are planks of promise. John Gerten found his calling in old barns, salvaging barn lumber that's been ravaged by the elements and time and slated for demolition.
Saw all these old barns falling down and thought it'd be a noteworthy thing to try and preserve some of them for a better purpose.
And that purpose? Turning barns into birdhouses and creating a business along the way. He's preserving the surviving parts of 7 Michigan barns and using their seasoned pieces to build birdhouses and feeders.
It's more than just a structure of beams and shingles. It's a way of life.
John received classical art training, which is evident when you see the results of his 19th century craftsmanship in a 21st century world.
We have come to live in a disposable age. Everything's designed to be tossed.
Except in John's workshop, where few scraps are left unused. They become the fine detail that John strives to achieve.
Everything's handmade. I mean, all this, it's all hand cut.
But a process like that cannot be rushed, as he spends hours to get the details just right. John and his occasional help build maybe 100 houses a year.
This is a 19th century product. Doing a day? Never. If I'd knock out 10 in a week, that's a darn good week.
He purchases barns past their prime, stripping and ripping them down to the frame, giving him ample piles of aged material. John finds character in every cracked and splintered piece of wood. At the core of his efforts, conservation and a higher calling.
Even a small thing like a birdhouse is making a statement about history. We've saved a piece of history, and we're bringing a new generation of native birds into the world by using that, repurposing that material. Something of a greater order. It should be a thing of reverence to save the past and bring that into the future. You know, isn't that really what it's all about?
A holiness in history. One man's vision to allow the beauty and age of restored barn wood to once again house nature's delicate creatures. And that's all the time we have this morning. We're sure glad you tuned in and joined us for this special edition of Ag Day. For all of us here, I'm Clinton Griffiths. Have a great day in farm country.
Ag Day is powered by Ram Trucks, America's longest lasting pickups.